Hi, and welcome to another Complete 3D Concepts tutorial. My name is Josh, and in this 4-part tutorial series we will be taking an in-depth look at working with point clouds in the free version of Autodesk Recap. We will be covering all stages of the process, from the user interface to importing of scan data and then working with the scan data once you have it set up. During this series we will be talking about the tips, tricks and traps that we have found in our time working with point clouds in Recap. In the last part of this series, we will be looking at setting up a point cloud with the view to taking it into either Inventor or AutoCAD to work with. Due to the amount of information we will need to cover on this topic, I will be breaking this tutorial up into 4 episodes. You can subscribe to our channel to get notifications when we upload them, find them on our channel, or we will add links to the description below as they get posted. If you are revisiting this series to refresh your memory on something, I have provided some timestamps in the description below to allow you to jump to the topic changes if you need to. Before we get started, if you haven't already, you should download and install the latest version of Recap, as some of the older versions have some major bugs and the Autodesk team have worked really hard and done a great job of fixing a lot of the issues. During this series we'll be working on version 3.0.2.12, which is the latest version at the time of recording this tutorial. If you are not seeing the same thing as I am showing you, you will need to update your version of the software. We will also keep an eye on the software and add amendment videos if things should change in later versions. You shouldn't rely on your desktop application manager to do this for you though, as it doesn't, or never used to, upgrade between major versions. Only minor version upgrades were done this way. Autodesk have also made a little change a while ago where now you have to download the professional version of Recap, but after a 30-day trial it reverts to the free version. The difference between the professional and free versions is probably worth a tutorial in itself, but suffice to say that all you need is a free version for most jobs unless you are doing your own scanning. That said, even we don't have the professional version here at Complete 3D Concepts, so if you have received scan data from us, it will be ready to go in Recap and you will only need the free version. As such, everything you will be seeing in this tutorial will be done with the free version. There is a link in the description for the Recap download, or you can Google Autodesk Recap download. So pause the video and go and get it if you need to. So, with all that out of the way, less talking, more CADing. When you first open Recap, you'll be greeted with this screen. You will see the buttons up here for opening your files, starting projects and changing default settings. Down here you'll see either the sample project or some of your previous projects if you have already been using it. Over here we have a heap of links to the various Autodesk sites, which can be handy or interesting for newcomers, but they soon get annoying as they slow down the opening time of the program if you have a slow internet connection like I do. The only thing you might be really interested in on the home screen is the settings. If you click the cog here, you will get the settings dialog. On the general tab you can adjust your coordinate system, so if your drafting program has Y up for example, like SolidWorks, you can easily spin the point cloud and export it with the rotated coordinate system. Or likewise, rotate a point cloud that has been supplied with an incorrectly aligned coordinate system. Most of the time you shouldn't have to worry about this, but it's probably handy to know. The near plane, far plane are limits at which Recap hides or clips the points on display in perspective mode. If you can imagine that your point cloud goes out into 3D space starting at your computer screen, there would be a plane 10mm in from the back of your screen that hides the points between it and the screen. The far plane then hides any points that are out past that far plane. I have always left these at default settings, but if your computer is struggling to display the entire point cloud, you might consider changing these settings to help with that. Or, if you are dealing with a very tight environment that has been scanned, like a processing facility for example, adjusting these might help with displaying or viewing the details you need to see. The field of view is pretty obvious, but like I said, I've never had to change these settings from their default, so it's unlikely you will. What you may be more interested in on this tab is units and precision. Change this to your preferred units and precision, and then uncheck this auto-appropriate units. What this checkbox will do is if you have the unit set to millimeters for example, and take a measurement that is over a meter, it will automatically change the measurement display to meters or kilometers if Recap thinks it's more appropriate. Some people may find this helpful, but it drives me up the wall. I have noticed though that these settings won't necessarily be applied to all of your scan projects, so you might find you need to change them again in the specific project sometimes. On the Files tab, you can adjust the number of previous projects you will see down the bottom here when opening Recap. You can change the temporary file location, which sometimes needs to be on a drive other than C if you are processing scan data, which we will talk about in depth later, but otherwise it can stay as the default, and you can also add search file paths. What do search file paths do, I hear you ask? That's a great question, I say, because I had to look this one up for myself when making this tutorial because I've never had to use them before. So here's what they do. When you create your point clouds in Recap, Recap makes note of where the point cloud files were saved. If you later move the project to another folder to be worked on, you can add the working folder here, and when you go to open the Recap project again, if it can't find the point cloud files in the creation folder or the folder where the project is saved, it will look in the search file paths for them also. You can add more than one path if you wish, but the workflow I will be showing you in these tutorials has no need for them. This only leaves the Advanced tab. Under Advanced, you can mess with the memory usage if you're that way inclined, but I tend to leave this as default settings as I figure Autodesk probably knows better than me what works for their programs. Also, Recap mainly works off your CPU and not the RAM, so tweaking this will likely make little difference to anything. Obviously, you can change your language settings here if you want, and if you're a real software geek, you can find out who supplied the video codec. Okay, so now all the boring stuff is out of the way, we want to open our project. If you have received your scan data from Complete 3D Concepts and we established at the start of the job that you need a Recap file, you will have been supplied with an RCP file. But Recap has two native file formats. They are RCP and RCS, otherwise known as a Reality Capture Project and a Reality Capture Scan. The difference in the two is right there in the name, where the RCP file is like a DWG file or an assembly file, and this contains all the reference scans and the information and settings to display them correctly. The RCS file is a single scan file where it can be a single scan from one location from a scanner, or it can be made up of multiple scans combined that have been exported from a Recap project. Technically, there is a third file format, and that is RCM, but they are, I think, a photo project file, and I've never had to work with them, so I'll not be covering them in these tutorials. To get started, we will take a look at getting RCS files into Recap. If you have an RCP file, remember you can skip this bit in the description below by clicking on the timestamp. Because RCS files are scan files, you'll have to create a project file or an RCP for it or them to go into. You can either click on the Scan Project button, or you can double-click your RCS file from Windows Explorer. Either way will take you to the Import Scans page with the Create New Project dialog box open. Here, you will give your project a name and select the file location where you want to save your RCP file. I typically save mine in the folder where the scan is that I want to import. In this case, the scans are in a folder for this tutorial, so that's where I will save this project. The next thing you will have to do is find your RCS file or files to import. So select the Files to Import button. If you have a lot of RCS files that make up one big scan project, you can select the folder they are in instead of selecting them all individually by clicking the Select Folder to Import button. If you are going to do this, the RCS files will need to have a common origin point for the entire scan project layout. Otherwise, they will all come in on top of each other in one huge mess. I will just take this moment to say that if this is what you are getting, you will need to have the scans registered together and re-exported to RCS format by whoever did your scans. If you still have a trial of the professional version of Recap, registration is something that you can try yourself, but unless you have experience with this, it's not a great idea, as there are a lot of things that can go wrong during the registration process that can create large errors in the scan registration. I would strongly advise leaving it to your scan service provider to do for you. If that's not an option, we deal with these kinds of issues regularly and can possibly help, so feel free to get in touch. Once you have your scans selected, you will be taken to this page where you can see one circle for each RCS file you have imported. If you have double-clicked your single RCS file from Windows Explorer, it will automatically take you to this page once you've saved your project in the Create New Project dialog, with one circle for the RCS file that you clicked on. If you need to import other scans, you can click on the plus button here and add your other files. Alternately, you can click on the Folder button and select the folder. Over here, you have the Scan Setting button. In here, you can change some settings that will alter the point cloud during the import process. As you are working with RCS files, which have already been through registration and recap once before, I would recommend not touching these settings. These settings are something we will talk about in more depth in the next tutorial. Because you are working with native recap formats, the Launch Project button down here will be displayed. Click that and you have your scan data ready to work with. For now, we need to go back to helping those that have been given an RCP file, but don't jump ahead just yet, this won't take very long. If you have received an RCP file, you should have also received a folder named the same as your RCP file with support at the end of it. This folder will contain different information depending on what format scan data files were used to create your recap project. Typically, there will be one or more RCS files with some BK files with a number after them, as well as a temporary cache files folder. Whatever the case, both your RCP file and this support folder need to be in the same folder location on your hard drive for your RCP to work, because the RCP references that support folder for the scan information. If you have created your RCP file from RCS files, you will see this folder has been created but doesn't have any RCS scans in it. This is because your project is referencing the original RCS files that were used in your project creation. You can move your RCS files into this support folder after you have saved your project and closed Recap to keep things neat if you would like, but it is not necessary. With this in mind, you should be able to open your RCP by either double-clicking it in Windows Explorer or by browsing to it via the File Open command from the home screen. Now that you have an open and working RCP file, it is strongly advised to do a save at this point to avoid any issues if Recap should crash for some reason. You can do that by hovering over the home icon here and clicking the save icon. You will notice as you move over the save icon that the save as icon will appear below it. This will allow you to save a copy of your RCP file as a different name. You should be careful of doing this though, because when you do a save as, it also saves a whole copy of the support folder and all the files in it. This means if you have a 100 GB point cloud file, you will end up with a duplicate copy of that file, so 200 GB worth of information on your hard drive. This is only really an issue for hard drive space though, so use it as you see fit. That brings us to the end of our first episode in this 4-part series. In the next episode, we will have a look at importing non-native scan data into Recap, some of the differences between the different point cloud file formats, and some of the things you need to be careful of when importing point clouds. If you like what you have seen here, please don't forget to click the like button below to let me know, and also don't forget to subscribe to be among the first to get the rest of the parts in this series as we post them. If you have any questions about what you have seen in this video, please feel free to post them in the comments below and we will try and answer them as fast as we can. Thanks for watching and catch you next time.